Mediocrity doesn't enter your life because of a lack of talent. It shows up when low standards go unnoticed. And the most dangerous part is that it happens automatically, every single day, without making a sound. You wake up, go through your tasks, stay busy, but deep down, it feels like you're always in the same place. Not because you're standing still, but because you're stuck in routines that drain your focus, energy, and ambition without you even realizing it. The truth is simple and uncomfortable. The difference between growth and stagnation isn't motivation, luck, or intelligence. It lies in the invisible systems that govern your daily decisions. In today's video, you're going to learn exactly which silent behaviors keep people stuck at a mediocre level and how to eliminate them in a practical and permanent way. Stick around until the end, because some of these patterns seem harmless until they completely destroy your potential. 1. Eliminate trivial decisions to free up cognitive energy. Most people wake up tired before the day even begins, and almost no one realizes the real reason. It's not a lack of motivation or too much hard work. It's the invisible drain caused by constantly making small decisions. Clothes, coffee, schedule, task order, everything requires a choice. Each decision burns mental energy. Average people treat this as normal. High performers understand it as a silent leak in their performance. Here's a contrast that hurts the ego but makes the game clearer. Mediocre people waste their best brain power making irrelevant decisions because it gives them a false sense of control. High performers do the opposite. They automate the basics to protect their minds. They don't pick out clothes every day, don't negotiate with themselves in the morning, and don't improvise the start of their day. This isn't rigidity, it's cognitive strategy. Science explains exactly why this works. A classic study conducted by Roy Baumeister and his team in the US in 1998 analyzed how repeated decision-making affects self-control throughout the day. In controlled experiments, participants who made lots of simple decisions showed a significant drop in discipline, focus, and emotional resilience just a few hours later. The effect became known as decision fatigue. Less mental energy means worse decisions right when they matter most. Now think about it practically. If you start your day deciding everything, by the time something important comes up, your mind is already worn out. That's why smart people sabotage their own consistency by the end of the day. The solution isn't willpower, it's design. Create 3 standard decisions, one for the morning, one for work, and one for the evening. The brain loves predictability when the goal is peak performance. These standard decisions work like mental tracks. The same sequence upon waking, the same structure for starting work, the same end-of-day ritual. Not because you're limited, but because you understand how the mind works. The less cognitive friction, the more clarity. The more clarity, the more self-control. That frees up energy for strategy, creativity, and decisions that actually generate wealth. To sustain this, high performers use a simple and powerful tool, fixed checklists, always in the same order, triggered by the same cues. Nothing fancy, nothing motivational, just smart repetition. When the basics become automatic, the brain enters a state of functional calm. And it's in that state that high-level decisions become clearer. Control starts with the simple. And whoever masters the simple, masters the game. 2. Stop confusing movement with progress. There's a silent mistake that keeps people busy for years without truly moving forward. They stay active all day, reply to messages, join meetings, handle minor urgencies, and still feel stuck. The problem isn't lack of effort. It's confusing movement with progress. Movement eases anxiety. Progress creates results. Most people use busyness as psychological anesthesia. Always having a ton of things to do gives them a sense of importance and usefulness. But real value isn't born from chaos, it comes from concrete output. Elite professionals learn this early. They know not every task deserves attention, and being too busy is often a sign of lack of clarity, not ambition. Data backs up this uncomfortable truth. A 2015 analysis by the McKinsey Global Institute, based on productivity studies in knowledge work across large organizations, showed that less than half the time spent in offices results in measurable impact. The rest is lost to reactive tasks, excessive communication, and work with no real effect. In other words, Much of what feels like effort is just noise. That's why high performers start their days differently than most. Before opening emails, messages, or feeds, they define one critical output, one specific result that, if delivered, makes the entire day worth it. It's not a long list. It's a clear decision. Everything that doesn't contribute to that output becomes secondary, no matter how urgent it seems. This behavior isn't random, it's strategic protection. Top executives and operators intentionally block out periods of deep, uninterrupted work because they know that real value demands sustained focus. They don't negotiate those blocks with trivial distractions. The world reacts. They execute. That difference changes everything in the long run. At the end of the day, the right question isn't, how much did I do, but what did I deliver? Movement exhausts and deceives. Progress requires choice, sacrifice, and the courage to stay quiet while the world runs in circles. When you stop confusing action with advancement, your time starts working in your favor. And that's what separates those who just seem busy from those who actually grow. 3. Cut out environments that normalize mediocrity. Most people believe that performance comes from individual motivation, but that's a comfortable half-truth. In reality, your environment shapes your behavior much more deeply than willpower ever could. You might have ambition, plans, and even discipline, but if you're surrounded by low standards, your performance will gradually slip. Not because of weakness, but due to unconscious adaptation. Humans adjust their own standards to whatever is considered normal around them. If the group complains, you start complaining. If the group procrastinates, you slow down. If the group treats mediocrity as acceptable, your mind relaxes. Few people notice this because the effect is gradual, silent, and socially validated. That's what makes the wrong environment so dangerous. Social psychology explains this phenomenon clearly. A 2004 review by Robert Cialdini and Noah Goldstein in the United States analyzed dozens of studies on social norms and behavior. The results showed that people adjust their performance and decisions just by observing group patterns, even without direct instructions or explicit pressure. The environment teaches what's acceptable without saying a word. This is where a rarely practiced but powerful exercise comes in, an environment audit. Take an honest look at the places you spend time in, the people you talk to, the content you consume, and the stimuli around you. Not to judge anyone, but to identify patterns. Where do you grow? Where do you settle? What lifts your energy? What drags it down? High performers don't romanticize social interaction. They apply the 80-20 rule to relationships and environments too. 80% of their social time happens with people who operate at high standards, who talk about ideas, execution, responsibility, and growth. The rest is just noise. It's not arrogance. It's identity protection. When you cut out environments that normalize mediocrity, something interesting happens. You don't need as much motivation. Discipline feels more natural. Focus increases without heroic effort. Because the standard around you pulls you up, not down. Sustainable growth rarely comes from intense motivation. It comes from environments where excellence becomes the new normal. 4. Replace motivation with systems. Most people rely too much on motivation, and that's a costly mistake. Motivation is unstable, emotional, and heavily context-dependent. It shows up when conditions are favorable and disappears exactly when you need it most. Average people wait to feel ready to take action. High performers act even when they don't feel like it. The difference isn't in desire, it's in structure. There's a dangerous myth that winners are simply more motivated. In reality, they just rely on it less. Elite athletes, market operators, and consistent leaders don't ask their body or mind if they're in the mood. They follow clear, repeatable, and predictable systems. The system decides. Emotion follows. That's what creates performance stability in chaotic environments. Behavioral psychology explains why this works so well. Studies on habit formation show that behavior doesn't come from willpower, but from the combination of cue, routine, and reward. When those three elements are clear, the brain goes into automatic mode. Charles Duhigg solidified this model by analyzing repeated patterns in high-performance individuals and organizations. The core idea is simple. Those who design the process outperform those who depend on mood. In practice, This changes how you take action. Instead of waiting to feel motivated to train, study, or execute, you define a fixed trigger. It could be a specific time, a location, or a prior action. The brain learns to associate that cue with a routine, no inner negotiation. The less you argue with yourself, the more consistency you build. A common mistake is trying to start too big. Efficient systems start small and inevitable. A daily micro-habit, less than 2 minutes long, is more powerful than ambitious plans that require emotional energy. The initial goal isn't intensity, it's repetition. Identity is built through frequency, not occasional bursts of effort. When you replace motivation with systems, something shifts quietly. Discipline stops feeling like a burden and becomes your default. You begin to trust processes more than feelings. That brings calm, predictability, and sustainable growth. People rich in results aren't constantly trying to hype themselves up. They simply execute systems that work, even on the bad days. 5. Speak less, document more. There's a clear difference between those who seem smart and those who actually make good decisions over time. Average people talk a lot. They explain, justify, promise, vent. High performers document. They turn thoughts into something visible, reviewable, and measurable. Excellence doesn't live in loose talk. It lives in organized records. Talking brings immediate emotional relief. Documenting requires clarity. When you write, you can't hide behind vague phrases or pretty intentions. Writing exposes flaws in logic, contradictions, and poorly thought-out decisions. That's why many people avoid documenting. Not because they lack time, but because they're afraid to face their own thinking without filters. Research shows this goes beyond a subjective feeling. A study published by Harvard Business Review in 2019 analyzed professionals who used structured writing for strategic decision-making. The method involved describing context, options, and criteria before taking action. The result was a significant increase in clarity, decision quality, and reduction in rework. Writing organizes thought before mistakes happen. In practice, the habit is simple but powerful. Create a decision journal. Not an emotional diary, a technical record. Write down the decision context, the chosen action, and the expected result. Just a few lines, no drama. This forces you to think like a strategist, not someone just reacting to the environment. The real value comes in the review. Taking 10 minutes a week to revisit past decisions creates an effect few people experience. You start spotting patterns. Where do you get it right? Where do you repeat mistakes? Where do you make good decisions under pressure? And where do you self-sabotage? This level of self-awareness accelerates growth like almost nothing else. When you talk less and document more, something shifts in your internal posture. Your decisions become calmer, less impulsive, and more aligned with your long-term goals. You stop living off verbal improvisation and start operating with strategic memory. People who build wealth and leadership don't rely only on what's in their heads. They build external systems to think better. 6. Turn feedback into an asset, not an attack. Most people say they want to grow, but they shut down at the first sign of real feedback. The problem isn't a lack of intelligence, it's ego fragility. When the ego is unstable, any observation feels like a threat. Instead of listening, the mind defends. Instead of learning, it justifies. This behavior silently blocks progress. High performers operate with a different mindset. They don't associate feedback with identity. They connect it to system improvement. A negative comment doesn't mean I'm bad. It means there's something I can adjust. This emotional separation is a trained skill, not a personality trait, and it radically changes the pace of growth. Psychology explains this pattern clearly. Studies led by Carol Dweck over many years followed students and professionals in high-pressure environments. The data showed that individuals with a growth mindset handle mistakes better, process criticism more rationally, and demonstrate greater resilience and performance over time. The deciding factor wasn't talent, it was how they interpreted feedback. In practice, turning feedback into an asset requires a simple but powerful shift. Whenever someone points something out, the question isn't, is this fair? It's, what will I do differently tomorrow? That question moves the focus from ego to action. It prevents emotional rumination and forces operational clarity. Even when feedback is poorly delivered, there's almost always a useful insight hidden inside. Elite professionals go even further. They don't wait to make big mistakes before hearing hard truths. They ask for feedback in advance. They anticipate corrections, test perceptions, and course correct early. That lowers emotional, financial, and reputational costs. It's not performative humility. It's strategic intelligence applied to personal growth. When you stop treating feedback like an attack and start treating it like input, something shifts deeply. Your learning curve accelerates. Your posture stays calmer under pressure. And your confidence becomes more solid because it no longer depends on constant approval. Sustainable growth requires a trained ego. Those who understand this play the game on a different level. 7. Treat time as non-renewable capital. Most people say they value time, but behave as if it were infinite. They accept interruptions without criteria, let external stimuli dictate their schedules, and stack commitments without evaluating the real cost. Average people treat time as something flexible. High performers treat time as capital. And when capital is poorly spent, it doesn't come back. The problem starts with how the brain perceives the day. When everything feels urgent, nothing is truly important. This confusion creates the illusion of productivity while time slips away in micro-distractions. It's not a lack of discipline, it's a lack of structure. If you don't define where your time is going to be invested, you'll end up giving it to whatever demands it. Behavioral data makes this even clearer. A report by Rescue Time, published in 2018, analyzed the digital habits of thousands of users in the US and found that people underestimate the time spent on seemingly quick digital tasks by up to 30%. Small checks, tab switching, and constant interruptions fragment the day without us realizing it. The cost isn't visible, but it's massive. That's why high performers use time blocking with built-in error margins. They don't plan their day as if they were perfect machines. They account for delays, mistakes, and the unexpected. Every block has a clear purpose and breathing room. This lowers anxiety and increases actual execution. Smart planning isn't rigid, it's realistic. Another thing that separates amateurs from elite professionals is how they organize their schedule. Instead of thinking only in terms of hours, they think in terms of energy. Tasks that require deep thinking are scheduled during periods of high mental clarity. Operational tasks are pushed to lower energy moments. The time is the same, but the return is completely different. When you begin to treat time as non-renewable capital, your choices shift automatically. You become more selective, calmer, and less reactive. You start saying no without guilt and yes with intention. Wealth, leadership, and sustainable growth require this shift in mindset. Those who waste time pay with frustration. Those who invest time earn freedom. 8. Eliminate low-quality inputs. Few people like to admit this, but no one grows beyond the quality of what they consume daily. Ideas, conversations, news, videos, and repeated opinions shape your mental framework far more than any motivational quote. Average people keep their minds open to any and every input. High performers are extremely selective about what they let in. Not out of elitism, but for cognitive self-protection. The human brain wasn't built to handle a constant stream of irrelevant information. When you're always exposed to fragmented stimuli, shallow controversies, and reactive content, your focus weakens without warning. You keep functioning, but at a shallow level. You make decisions faster, but worse. You react more and think less. It creates the illusion of being informed when you're really just distracted. Reports from the American Psychological Association, published since 2017, analyzed the effects of multitasking and digital overstimulation on attention and working memory. The data showed a significant drop in sustained concentration and a greater difficulty in retaining relevant information. The more simultaneous inputs, the lower the depth of thought. The cost shows up in rushed decisions and shallow reasoning. That's why high performers do something that seems radical to most, an information diet. For a short period, usually 7 days, they cut out social media, constant news, and content that doesn't lead to direct learning. It's not escapism, it's a way to recalibrate the mind. When the noise drops, clarity comes back almost immediately. In place of overload, they apply a simple rule: Learn is always greater than scroll. Before consuming something, the question isn't, is this interesting? It's, does this make me better at something? It could be a book, a study, a deep conversation, or a practical skill. The filter isn't momentary entertainment, it's cognitive return. When you eliminate low-quality inputs, your mind slows down to the right rhythm. Focus deepens, memory improves, and strategic thinking returns. You start noticing nuances that used to go unseen. Mental control doesn't come from force, it comes from filtering. Those who protect what enters protect what they're building. 9. Raise your standards, not your hours. Most people try to solve stagnation by working longer hours. They stay up late, stretch the day, sacrifice rest, and call it commitment. But the problem is that more hours rarely elevate your level. They just extend the same pattern. High performers understand something different. Real growth comes from higher standards, not more effort. When your standards are low, more time only produces more of the same, average output, rushed decisions, predictable results. But when your standards rise, your brain is forced to evolve. You begin noticing details you used to ignore, revisiting your choices more carefully, and rejecting easy solutions. The initial discomfort doesn't come from the work, it comes from the internal demand. Top 1% professionals do this quietly. They redefine what's acceptable before execution begins. They don't just ask, does this work? They ask, is this at the level of the person I want to become? That filter completely changes the quality of the output. Less volume, more precision. Less rush, more impact. In practice, this starts before taking action. Defining clear quality criteria before you begin prevents you from slipping into autopilot. What makes this a good result? What would make it excellent? Where do you usually accept less than you could deliver? These questions recalibrate your mental standards and raise the bar without adding extra hours. There's a simple tool to reinforce this process. At the end of the day, ask yourself one honest question: would this pass through my own elite filter? Not the market's filter. Not other people's. Yours. That reflection creates internal alignment and reduces self-deception. Over time, your standard rises naturally because you no longer allow yourself to deliver less than what you know you're capable of. When you raise your standards instead of your hours, something powerful happens. Your work becomes cleaner, your mind more focused, and your growth more consistent. You stop negotiating with yourself and start operating with identity. People who build wealth, leadership, and legacy don't live exhausted. They live aligned with a level they refuse to drop.